Right now, I'd like to introduce Bill Robertson to the group, and we want to talk EAS again this week. Why do we want to talk about EAS over and over and over again? Well, there's several reasons. First of all, EAS is a very important tool for stations, especially in areas where there are storms and other disasters. And the features that you can do with EAS are very important. Secondly, there's this big push for EAS's software, and maybe you'd like to know where things are and what's going to happen to your EAS box. Are you going to have to buy a new one quickly or pay for software and then royalties every year? Well, Bill's got some thoughts here, and he will answer your questions. And we'll start off, Bill, with what's new in the Digital Alert Systems product.
So I wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time, Barry, on a little bit of the stuff that you had mentioned in the lead up to that. So today we want to talk a little bit about EAS message and defining the envelope. I'm going to explain that because that's going to be important for us as we go through some of the other parts around this. How can we leverage the event? And that seems kind of strange. Like, what are you talking about leveraging an alert? But there are some options and some interesting things that can be done, and I'll explain a little bit more. An alternate use case, and this is one of the other things that Barry's been involved in on some of the things in alternate language things to be able to do that. I will talk about Leap. Leap is a product thing that we've implemented for converting systems. So I'll go into a little bit more. This is kind of classic, very simple outline about what the EAS message looks like. So you've got the wonk, 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 which are the headers. And inside each of those headers, each of the headers is this ZC string, which essentially is the details about what the alert is about. And the reason that I bring this up is because I want to kind of put this in context of what this whole thing looks like, not just the headers and what's in there, but we look at this in what we call an envelope. So the wonk, wonk, wonk in the EAS headers, the two-tone attention signal, the alert voice, and the EOM, all of those are a makeup of what we call the audio envelope. The alert audio voice element of that is essentially what we call the payload. That's the payload. That's what you're really kind of sending. The other things are framing around it, but the essence of what we're trying to deliver is that alert audio voice or that. So those are the real kind of standard things. When I talk about the audio envelope, though, it contains everything from the initial wonks to the EOM wonks that we have. So there are some exceptions in this on the parlance of whether it's an RWT or an EAN. And really for that, on an RWT, there are two different ways that it can be presented. The two-tone and the alert voice are optional. So as you see on the A side, if I want to include a voice for the RWT, I must also include the attention tone. So I have to put that in there. On the B side, for an RWT, again, the options are the fact that you can do no alert voice. If there's no payload, you don't need to do the attention signal. So there are two options available for a properly formatted RWT. One thing that you learn as you play around in EAS is it's probably worse than English with the number of exceptions. I before E, except after this. So there's a lot of different things around that. RWTs are one of the elements around that. When we go into an EAN, it's again the same audio envelope, which is essentially started with the headers and the two-tone attention signal, but we don't have a sense of how long the president or the president's designee is going to talk. So it's an indeterminate length of time until we get to it. So a standard message will always start this, and EAN will always start the same way with the wonks and the two-tone attention signal, and then we switch. We go live. Minimal delay. What the FCC specifies is minimal delay for input to output from our receiving point to where we're actually producing that audio output, that live audio output. At the end, the message ends when the originator sends an EOM or terminates the transmission, and then the device sends an EOM to close the message. So you've opened the message with the initial FSK, and you close the message with the end of message. So again, little format exceptions for RWT and EAN, again, just based on the message type that we're talking about. If we look at this, though, we can actually expand the EAS signal, that envelope, into having additional elements on the front end and the back end. Basically, outside of the audio envelope, that space is available. So it seems kind of interesting. Oh, what about this? Well, for example, a pre-alert can be set up so that it segues into the alert. Now, some of the examples of using this in a nice way is to say, the following is brought to you as a public service of this station. To identify that. And instead of just all of a sudden cutting your programming and immediately going into wonk, 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 you can have a nice segue and understand, hey, person, or to the audience, recognize this is done for this reason. We're not just cutting this off or anything else. You've got a nice segue to say what's going on. It lets listeners know, and you avoid those nasty cuts right into it. The same thing with the post alert. We can have a message played after the end of the EOM and have it again, same kind of thing. This was brought to you as a public service of this station. But again, that format so that we've got a nice transition into the alert and transition back out of the alert. Those are kind of some simple things that can be used. It's still okay. We're not doing anything inside the alert, that audio envelope. That remains sacrosanct. We're not messing around inside that area. So those two edges that we have on the pre-alert and the post-alert are available for us. So we can do things. Again, a nice one is the segue, being able to do things in that particular concept of doing elements of it. So how can we leverage this? What's interesting that we can be done, and how do you do it? Well, one of the things you can do is leveraging the alert by putting a PSA, as we said, if an RWT, and this is the important thing, if you can recognize the event type, you can have different elements at the beginning. So if I know it's an RWT, I could have a very specific element that says it. Maybe I don't do it for an RWT. Maybe I do it for something else. But I can have a matching event type, allows me to customize the pre and the post audios. So in other words, it's not always the same pre-alert and not always the same post-alert. I can specify them based on the event type. So again, public awareness could be an example. Pre-alert to say it's a public service announcement. Maybe on a TOR you say, hey, this is critical information, pay attention. You can do other things around it to make them, stand up, recognize that it's not just going to be wonk, wonk, wonk. Hey, sorry to interrupt your programming. This is an important announcement regarding this event or something that's coming on. Again, these are the types of things that you have that are knowledgeable. So again, for no other reason, being able to segue between that and introduce the alert event based on the alert type could be something that really improves the on-air product of the station. So what's going on that you have with that? Here's another example. Let's do a flash flood warning. One of the things we can do is you can actually sell this space. Remember, it's not inside of the alert, and people say, oh, you're sponsoring an EAS event. No, we're not. What we're doing is we're saying there's something around here that probably could make sense. Sell that space. Since we know the event code, we could set up an advertiser as a sponsor. I mean, it could be expensive, inexpensive to the advertiser because it's a run of, it's basically called run a schedule. You set up a spot that it's catch as catch can. You don't have a fixed time position. You don't know when it's going to happen. But when it does run, guess what? It's in context. Hey, Mr. Customer, if this event occurs, I'm going to run you at the beginning of this thing. So when it triggers, it's in a contextual type of thing that you've got information, you know what's happening with these things. This is an example. We talked about this too. The one I always get is Morgan and Morgan, right? The kind of the ambulance chasing attorneys. I think Jeff, you had mentioned that particular thing, but it could be something about this is a flash flood warning. Maybe local insurance agent. Are you protected? As the type of thing just ahead of the alert coming out. These are the things that might make sense again from an advertising standpoint and take advantage of the space and the alert to be able to do that. This could be something, or could be other things around a visit with it. Here's a telephone number for this. Here's a website that you go to for more information. But it also works with other things too, where we're not just putting it on the pre, but we could do it on the post. So for example, here, a hurricane warning. We could bracket the alert like a donut. I put this in the context of like a jelly-filled donut. We leave the jelly in the center, that's the audio envelope, but we can bracket it on both sides. The first one could be the pre-alert that's a teaser. When I say a teaser here, it could be the following is brought to you as an important type of information around this. Pay attention. This is what it is. And at the end, it could be another example. I've got one that I'll show you about this here in just a bit. So, again, hurricane warning, we know the event, we know what it is, and you can specify this by the alert type. Post alert could be the full spot. Pick up your batteries, get your water. Here's your local hardware store. Check this website for more information. All of these things can be part and parcel of what you're doing. So bracketing the thing, because we know the event type, we can build different examples for every event type. Any questions? I want to cause pause because I've just been talking here for the last 15 minutes. If there's anyone has any questions, by all means, bring them up.
If you have a question, you can raise your hand. You can press your space bar. You can use alternate A to unlock your microphone. We'll take all that. And if you're on Zoom, you can type in a question in the chat box or right here on the Zoom as well. Zoom, YouTube.
So one of the questions is, okay, this is great, Bill. You've represented that there's this other space outside of the EAS event, and again, with knowledge of what the event type, we can do different things with it. So how do we do that? Well, in our space, we have what's called Alert Agent. I did a presentation a while ago about what Alert Agent is. Essentially, it's a very unique set of rules that are available inside of the DAS deck that can do different processes based on certain criteria. It's going to look at a whole bunch of input information and say, if it matches, I want you to do this. So one of the things that we can do, these are developed by node. Each node comes in there. So if you're looking for different node types, that's essentially what it is. It's a very customized, specialized set of filters that we are able to do that. And because we know the event types and other things around it, we can allow these nodes to process things very specific to that. So here's one of the nodes as an example. In the upper part, we've got the name of the node. It's just a name that you can define if you have it. What event codes do you want this node to act on? Is the node turned on? Basically, you can turn nodes on and off if you want to. The middle part is the filter settings. So along with this node and these event codes, what are my input sources? What do you want me to look for? What locations, what FIPS codes am I looking for? Not only inputs, FIPS, or who the originator is. I mean, I only want to look at this if it comes from a WXR, a weather-related type of thing. Those elements can be very, very specific. And so the middle part of the node is really what are the filter settings. And you can look at all these things to identify what there are. The next thing down is the action. What do you want this to do? In other words, if we match this filter, if we match this filter, what do you want me to do? And for example, you can see here on this particular one, we have no pre-alert, but the audio is set, the alert audio or the payload is say, if there's no audio accompanying this, I want you to generate audio from text to speech. So if I didn't get an audio file or couldn't download the audio file, whatever it might be, I want the payload to come from the text to speech. And then notice also there's a post alert. So based on this criteria, I can set up different inputs for post and pre-alert audios. So here's a perfect example. I've set up a filter that I called HUW, just, hurricane warning, that's it. It's specific to a hurricane warning. There's the event code, only a hurricane warning. It's turned on, and then it looks for these specific input sources. So it's looking for the radio stations I've defined at the front end of it, and it's also looking for iPods. If it finds it in this location, I've set up Pinellas and Hillsborough counties in the Tampa Bay area. Any of these guys, if they send a hurricane warning, I want you to do something. Well, guess what I do? Is my station says that I've created a pre-audio file called Al's Lumber, and I want that particular thing to play if it happens.
So stand by for an important announcement regarding a approaching hurricane.
There it is. So there's my first thing. Please stand by for an important announcement about approaching hurricane. Audio payload goes out, and we've defined the audio payload. And then after the event,
to Al's Lumber, this is where you get your hurricane supplies.
There you go. So the neat thing is I can set these up again by very specific elements. I can define them, I can put them in, but I've got now the ability to do a pre-alert and a post-alert audio bracketing these particular types of events. Again, I just did a simple example here. There's a hurricane thing, pay attention to it, and at the end, I mean, I could have this, Al's Lumber is the one that I'm using here saying, hey, this is where you go get your supplies or pick up your tarps or whatever it might be as necessary things. Again, this is kind of a public service type of thing that you're adding elements to that. If there could be other parts that you want to do, contact our website, see us for more information, go to this location. All of those things are accessible and available. Any questions so far? I haven't seen anything pop up, Barry.
Uh, we've got one here already in the chat box.
Nope.
It says, does commercializing the emergency alert service violate any rules or regulations?
No, it does not, because we're not commercializing. Remember, we left the audio envelope absolutely sacrosanct. We don't touch inside of that. Outside of the wonks and everything, it's air. It's our airtime, and we can do with it as we see fit. The neat thing is that the DAS deck allows us to automatically assign a pre and a post alert element to that, so that we can build those in these particular nodes.
Mountain Valley Broadcast Service mentions your before or after. You may be eligible for compensation.
It's possible. I mean, the thing that I'm looking at here too is again this idea of and it might sound strange, like saying, oh, sponsor these things, but if you can put it in the context of you're providing more public service, it really goes a long way. So it's not like you're just, hey, I'm openly saying I'm trying to extract more money. But the thing is too, advertisers and people. I mean, everybody knows if you people don't necessarily like commercials, but if the commercial or the event is something that of interest to you, then it is value to you. If it's something that isn't, again, we talked about all of the pharmaceutical stuff. I want to know the people that come up with those crazy names on each of these particular drugs, because I think you have to be on some of the drugs to come up with some of the names for the drugs, but that's another story.
That is indeed. Bill, I'm going to bring up a question that I raised before you checked in,
Uh-huh.
and that I think is very important, especially if you get a sponsor to underwrite or add to an alert or a test. How do you know it got on the air? I've mentioned this several times, discussed it with Larry just before you got here. There have been 3 cases that I can tell you in southern Arizona where stations were logging EAS tests every week, and yet they were not getting on the air.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, that's one of the things and it's always a challenge. We can do only so much on our side. And what I mean by that, we can go through our logs, we can show that we pushed it out, we did the switch, we did everything there, but you cannot, and there is a trick. I will tell you there is a trick. One thing is you can actually use the DAS deck itself on another input. So input your own station back into it and see if it decodes it. So that's a trick you can do. But one of the things is you're asking a device to test itself, and that's not necessarily the way to do it. But there is a tricky way, as I said, if you have an output and then have your own station tuned back in, it will come back into the DAS deck as a decoded alert. It won't forward it, because we can say if it comes in from this station ID, the alert agent will say, hey, I don't want to forward this, just log it. And you can actually log yourself. And that way your whole air chain is complete because it came back into the DAS deck and came out as a logged event.
And this is important because the chief operator who signs that log every week is really verifying that it did get on the air.
Yeah, I mean, if it were me, that's what I would do, is just as a kind of a test. Now, there are other systems out there, obviously, that are station loggers for a lot of other things that come into play. Actus, Vela, there's a lot of companies that make them. They make them, I think, primarily for TV and other things to actually have a way of record keeping across all those types of things. But there is, as I said, there's a trick way by just feeding your station output, tune it itself. So you've got everything in your air chain all the way through the RF coming back into the device and re-logging that it decoded it.
Not only logging, but can the DAS deck record it?
Well, yeah, because, well, when you say record it, I mean, we record every one of the inputs for as a snapshot for logging purposes. So we can record that and as a snapshot. Now, we only normally store the last three snapshots. So unless you want to go in there and pull it out, we'll overwrite that after the last third one comes in there. Unless someone really wants to go and store it. But yeah, remember, it's not meant to be a device that is monitoring itself. So the typical thing is, a device under test shouldn't be the device to test it, but there could be a third party. But there is a way, as I said, to loop it back in from another feed and at least log it that it was sent out and received by your device. Does that make sense? I hope. Was it Larry Wilkins, that were asking about it?
Well, no,
Yeah. That we do that on several stations in Alabama that had that problem, and we just very simply just take your mod monitor or whatever and loop it back into
Yep.
an unused input, and that way when you look at the log on Mondays or something, you'll actually see that I saw it come over the air. It
Yep.
reported back to me, so I know. Because if you look at the FCC rules, it doesn't say check every week to make sure your device issues it. It says, did you transmit or did you receive?
Yep.
In the case of an RWT, of course, it's just receive, it's log only. But an RMT or stuff like that, it asks, did you retransmit the RMT? So this
Yep.
is a good way to verify that.
Absolutely. So yeah, good question, and I appreciate that. Again, like I said, the ability to loop back in and test it is one way that it can be done. So one thing that we also have is if you have a DAS with omnilingual, omnilingual supports multiple languages. So I'm showing here a different alert node example. This one and this device has omnilingual turned on. And you're going, okay, Bill, what is omnilingual? Omnilingual is another thing that we have to be able to extend languages. So if you notice here on the output filter section here, what do you want this to do? There's no pre-alert audio. The alert audio, again, that payload element is text to speech if no audio, but we also have a post EOM omnilingual. So in that context, there is a way to add the omnilingual output, and that could be if my station is in English, I could put Spanish after it. Remember, it's not within the context of the envelope. It has to be after the EOM. As you see there, post EOM omnilingual. What we do is we can append the thing with the other language. And we have equivalents. I will tell you text equivalents that bring in the dynamic elements of the alert. So the time and everything else are all built into that for the omnilingual to present what essentially is the same alert information in Spanish, in French, in German, Italian, Hmong Somali, or as many as you want. We can actually append multiples. You can do English, French, German right after it. So we have that capability. Again, you can select it here. This, again, puts those audios after the audio envelope. We've done, keep that audio envelope secure. After the envelope, we can put omnilingual. Oh, and by the way, we can then append a post alert after all of those. So the thing is we still support pre and post audio, but we can also do additional languages that are outside of the audio envelope. Now, by the way, within the DAS deck, you can select the language you want in the payload. If I have a Spanish station, why don't I put Spanish in the payload and then English as my appended or omnilingual output afterwards? So if that's my primary audience, I can actually use that as my primary agent. I'm going to put Spanish as my payload audio, but then I can append English or I can append something else after that. So that's one of the neat things about being able to deal with this thing. If I turn on the audio, the omnilingual functionality and have the text to speech engine for that language that I want to do, I can put all of these things together in sequence and still keep the audio envelope pristine. And that's what we want to do.
hey, Grady, I see your hands up.
Oh,
I see the feature you're talking about now, and the pre-alert audio feature is working hand in hand for radio stations to make the EAS even more useful in their individual communities because they can use for the important emergency messages at the beginning just a quick message that says to hear this alert in Spanish or whatever your other secondary predominant language is, listen immediately after the English to hear it in Spanish.
Yep, exactly. I mean, and that's a great example of how to do that. We've done it with different things, and again with the languages, depending on what you're doing. And Grady, absolutely, thank you for bringing that up. And that's a good way to do it. Say what you're going to do what it is, and use it as a things to help people. Don't wait till the EOM. Hey, the language I want to hear is coming up after, and that's a great way to do it. So when you look at this, there's another thing that we could look at, and I put this out as an alternate use case. Remember, Omnilingual supports multiple languages because we've done. I hate the term, and it's a term that's used in EAS as translations. It's not translations. Essentially, what we have is we've got text equivalents for all of those languages. For German, if I get a an MEP code for something, I have a German equivalent of MEP, so it is properly pronounced in German in the right way. So it's the same thing that you would do. So I've got all of those event codes have the text equivalents, and then what we do is we blend in the time and the date and everything else, which is all part of the original EAS string, right? The time, date, the duration, those things are all blended in an omnilingual thing. So that's good. It supports all those common languages. But we can also use other languages and offer a limited support. When I say limited, if we put let's say a different one, and Barry's close to this. Let's say we have a Navajo Nation. We've got something that might be something very important. We could create audio files for each of those events that might be something for that community and put it in as the post EOM. That way, if I've got a flash flood warning in this example here, I can put what should be, listen, this is a flash flood warning, be alert to these types of things. It's not going to have the dynamic elements because we've pre-canned this message. This is, something that we've pre-recorded and we've put in there at the post audio of this thing. But it does have the ability to at least communicate better what it was that the audio envelope contained. What's going on? Oh, this is a flash flood warning. What should I do? Get to high ground. Do this. Do this. You can offer some suggestions or offer a place to go get more information on it. This is really something that can be done. And when I talk about uncommon languages, I'm talking about things like, Native American tongue, things like that might be well served in certain communities, but still can be used. And again, it's not going to have the dynamic elements, but it can definitely be used to present information in this, as I say, these uncommon languages. So Barry, this was the thing that you and I have talked about before about being able to do this. And I think, the same thing, Grady, to your point, if you did the pre-alert as in the same language and stuff to offer that information, it further exemplifies what and how you can do this. So really, when you look at this, as I'm saying, making lemonade out of lemons, if you're stuck having to do this, what can you do? Well, one thing is you can use your DAS deck to provide a smoother transition. At least let the audience know what to expect. It's a lot better than hard cuts. It's a lot better than just wonk 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 out and everything else like that just punches a hole in your programming. And really a lot of things to be able to do that. Those pre and post audio files can definitely be leveraged to provide context. You know what the event is, and that way you can preface it, and you can, after the thing, talk about what you should do. Also, because we have the alert agent can do it by different regions, we can have multiple nodes. We don't have a limit to the number of nodes. I can have a different message if it's coming from the west or if it's coming from the east. I can have different things that are allowing me to put different elements around that. So area 1 could receive one type of message, area 2 could get a different message. Not to say that, your broadcast envelope is going to be able to separate them, but again, if it's coming in from one direction, from this county, I can have information on it. So we can selectively put these in there because we have information about the event type, the location, all of those pieces we can use to build what we want to put in those pre and post audio files. Run a schedule for sponsorships or ads, if you will, around these things are easy. They're low cost because you don't set up a big contract with it. You say, hey, look, I'll put you in on this thing, but they're very meaningful when they're active. In a hurricane type of thing, your local lumber yard, get your plywood, get your tarps, get your water, get your batteries, those kinds of things. When it is really eminent on those types of alerts, make great sense. And you're not having to manage this outside of the EAS device itself. Where I don't have to try to traffic them. I don't have to try to figure this out. It just automatically does it. It's a nice way to do that you've got that. And this is actually all part of the standard DASDEC software. There's nothing special. You just have to program it and be able to use it in that way. So hopefully this has provided some context about some interesting things that we could do, as I said, to make lemonade out of lemons. If we're going to get it, let's do something with it. Questions?
Hey, Bill, this is Larry. I had a technical question here. I assume that present operation, the interruption of audio and the return of audio to the regular programming change is handled by the EOM and the start of message. If you use pre and post, as you're talking about, I assume the DASDEC has a way that it starts before the start of message and ignores the EOM to return it back to program. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Larry, there could be a couple different things. Number one, we would either use a GPI or GPO to say, hey, we're going to go to the switch, or we're doing the switch ourselves. So inside the audio stream, we're controlling the audio switch. So when we do those playouts, we can do that. We have an ability to do what's called segmented output, where we can have a trigger on each element, pre-trigger, and then close trigger, audio envelope, trigger, those kinds of things. So you can have different ways to do that. So depending on whether you're doing automation and you're using, for example, our EAS net protocol, it's all embodied in EAS net. You would have the entire, what we call composite. If you have a pre-alert, we send the composite, which is an audio made up of the pre, the envelope, and the post, if you had it, as one file that the automation would play out. So we manage all of those things either by using the internal audio switch or sending the trigger commands to the downstream devices.
Hey, Grady, I see your hands back up.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
Okay. The thing that I have with several of my clients is we don't send the EAS messages out on the streams, because the streams are listened to essentially all over the world for some of my stations that have foreign language services and stuff like that. What I'm curious about is, does the Digital Alert Systems box, as it's presently available in its most recent hardware version, able to have a second output which could feed the stream with pre and post messaging that would be useful in making the EAS message more useful to listeners who are outside of the area of the AM or FM transmitter but are listening to your station?
Grady, make sure I understand your question. Is the question that I have one output style pre-post envelope in one, but then I have a different output on a second output?
Yeah, because I mean, Barry can talk to you about the problems that they have out in his area with stations that cover so many different areas that have different names and different, communities and different functions, that the present EAS as being deployed in America that you can't control with your box doesn't give enough information about how to identify a particular message to a particular sub area of the coverage of a station that might be a Class C. So what I'm trying to do is try to solve a problem, at least for stations that have more listeners, more listener area covered by their streaming than they do by their over-the-air broadcasts. so that if we made the EAS pre and post messages broader and more explanatory, if I can make up a word, could your box do that without us having to have two boxes?
I would do it in there's perhaps two possibilities. I'd have to think about this a little bit more. We could go into that. One is you can add multi-station to the DAS deck, and multi-station essentially splits it into two different encoder decoders. If I use multi-station, then station one could be assigned to do this type of event. It's got these. Station two could be assigned differently. Now, the crux of the matter ends up being the fact that I've got one playhead. Inside of the DAS deck itself, there's a single playhead, but we have an expansion box that we built a dozen years ago called multiplayer that has multiple playheads. So one DAS deck with multi-station, you can define exactly what you want to go on this stream and switch out, and what goes on this stream and switches out. And because multiplayer adds multiple playheads, they can be operating completely independently. And so it's not having to add a whole nother box, but adding the control logic with multi-station and potentially adding the multiplayer to give more playheads. It's still under the control of one DAS deck.
That's very good. Let me just give you my whole perspective on this, coming from 20 years on the programming side of radio back in the 60s and 70s. The thing that makes broadcast better than stream only is that we are community oriented, and station owners are really short-sighted when they don't realize that that's what makes us more valuable than people like the people coming from satellites in the sky. And we should be using that to get our audiences to engage with us more, simply because we actually care and we actually provide those services. And you could give us the ability to do that. Thank you.
Yep. Well, and I'll tell you what, the idea of looking at what broadcast can do that nobody else can do is very important. I think that's a critical element. So appreciate that. Any other questions? I'll move on to the next thing.
I'm going to ask Chuck Helstein here. He's posted in the
sorry.
chat box. Chuck, if you could unmute yourself and just talk to us a little bit about what you just put up here.
I don't have a
Yeah.
chat.
I was just trying to explain, if you guys can hear me, some alternative methods that would be like outside of the box, like literally, I suppose, and figuratively. So we leverage some different solutions for this, both for tracking and like live insertions. So in a lot of cases, we will take the alerts, we can process them through like a logic with AI. So we use N8N for orchestration, if you guys are familiar. And we can take all those EAS fields, send them in JSON to like a chatterbox, right? Chatterbox can then make a custom alert based on to what it knows out of the DAS DAC system. And to your point, we can imply all kinds of logic from this. So we can have like a geolocation database. So anyone that's currently logged in streaming, if it is not within that area, you could just have a cheesy like elevator bed music play. And as soon as that alert's over, it will switch back to your normal programming, right? That's one way you could do it without kind of living in that framework. But just a suggestion.
Very good. Appreciate that, Chuck. One of the things that I often, I know people complain about this because it has to be. You're driving along the interstate and the little braps come on, or you're told that there is a tornado in miserable county, and you don't know if it's ahead of you, behind you, alongside of you. And I think that one of the things that the Weather Service really did us a disservice is with these FIPS codes and then forcing the units. Now, if you can use AI, maybe this is something that maybe you and Bill ought to talk about that could help.
I was going to say, it's not necessarily even using AI. It's more or less just correlating your listener base and where they are.
Yep.
So if your station's like logging radio DNS and you're logging your app statistics and you're logging your actual like MP3 streams and ACC streams, you just collate that data set, right? And within a second, you can say, where's everyone listening from? If it's out of Arizona, I don't care. It drops all that set, and then your next data set flows on to send them to Chatterbox. process it, ship out the audio to Dropbox, load it into your automation. You're done in like 30 seconds or less.
I think we're talking about two different things in a way, Bill, and I'm just going to toss it back to you here.
Yep.
But I think at some point in the future, and maybe this is after the leap discussion into EAS's software, I'd rather know that there's a storm 5 miles west of Tucson moving east than there's a storm in West Pima County.
Right. Well, I think what Chuck's bringing forward is the fact that there is a way of looking again at the metadata associated with a particular thing and have two different courses of action.
Right.
And that's really it. I mean, as Grady was saying here, what could you do in this thing? And Chuck brings out here's another way in which you could look at that stuff, exercise the context of what the metadata is regarding the particular event. And if on my stream services, I just go quiet or put something else on there so that I'm either not putting it out on the stream, or there could be another alternate, which we talked about, which is putting something different on the stream. So there's a couple different areas, and I think that's a great dialogue. There's a lot of different pieces around that. Barry, it's always been one of those things too about how, and we've talked about this in the past too, where other things that we've done with using our alert agent to prevent things like message flooding and try to figure out. And this actually ties in. I'll tie it back in here in just a minute when we talk through some of the stuff. But if we're good with that, as I said, I'll bring kind of some context back in when we talk about software EAS and stuff like that. Other pieces and parts that I'd like to see myself. So
Good.
With that, I'll go ahead and continue on. So
Please.
one of the things that we did, and we actually showed this at NAB this year, was we created this thing called LEAP, and it just is an acronym for Legacy EAS Adapter Process. Essentially converting configuration files from other EAS devices into a DASDEC format. So if you have a legacy device right now, you can export that current configuration file and save it. So save it as a text version. There's a way to output that as a text version. What we do then is you log into your DASDEC and you select that file. You've stored that file now. You select that file as the file that I want to look at. Hey, this is the configuration from this legacy device. Bring it into the DASDEC. The DASDEC uses this LEAP to automatically convert it into a DASDEC configuration format. And we use a .zip extension because it expands it into all of the different fields that we have. So now your EAS event codes, your FIPS, and the filters from the old device are all propagated and put together in the DASDEC format. So all of the alert agent settings and everything else like that are now translated into a DASDEC format. The last thing you do is you select that converted file because it comes up and says, okay, now the file is converted, it's available for you, and you just install it into the DASDEC. Say, I want that, now that's converted, I want to take on that configuration. We always say that whenever you do this, it's a good idea to go back in and look at the settings to make sure and confirm that it's the right FIPS codes and things like that. But the thing is, it's so much easier because I don't have to start from zero. I already have got all my stuff in there from my device, and I want to just get my FIPS codes. I want to do this. I want to build the filters, and we do it differently, obviously using Alert Agent. But this gets you up and running very, very quickly. So it's really nice, and it's available just as a standard thing in our software as we go forward. So version 5.4 or something like that, or 5.5 going forward, this is already there. So if you have a legacy device, you can output its configuration file and put it into a DASDEC, and you've got it. So that's a big win of making transitioning from those older devices into current DASDEC equipment. So, Barry, that was the thing I wanted to kind of bring up because you asked the question about LEAP if we can. So that's a big one. So now let's go into if we will, touch the third rail. So this is basically Digital Alert Systems. I'll say my kind of look at what's going on. The NAB petitioned the FCC, but we feel that it's incomplete. The way that they position it to the FCC, they want to make one line change in there and say, oh, everything else is fine, we'll sort it out. They also reference the Nelson PPM encoder as, oh, it's just like this. And it is not. Absolutely not. just like that. There's a lot of other things that come in here, and I could take as a separate thing, go into a lot of detail around that. But if aside from being incomplete and referencing an analogy that is wrong right off the bat, we don't oppose the concept. Not at all. I mean, I think that unfortunately, some in the media have said, "Oh, well, there's these guys from Digital Alert Systems, and they don't want this at all because it's damning their business." No, that's not it. And in fact, we've done a lot of it with our collector. About 14 years ago, we already explored this, and we've done it. We sell Collector, which is a virtual machine instance of message processing, and we've been doing it for years. A lot of big customers, big companies use Collector as an aggregation point and deduplication, everything else like that. So it's not that we're opposed to it. We understand it. And in fact, it's because we've done it that causes us to have great concerns. The devil's in the details. You just can't throw this out there and say, "Oh, we want to just open it up and let everybody do software." Holy smokes. You're asking now for this, and recognize where we are. PPM does not, if PPM fails, you don't have a problem. Okay? In other words, you're not going to lose the potential of failing to alert people or to let them know. You don't have that kind of onerous impact if you lose a PPM. If you lose an EAS device, it could be very, very critical to life, limb, property, all those kinds of things. Part of that stuff too is, again, the devil in the detail. The petition doesn't outline how it would be regulatory set up, or the certifications, the conformance. Let's just talk about that. How are we going to do this? How should we compare this? How should we test one thing? I mean, one of the things that we've had to do in the past is test our device against other devices. We've got a stack of other devices, then we test it to make sure we're not breaking anything. Same thing, if they send an alert, we're not breaking something. How are we going to look at that? We have this whole thing now that it's software. Oh, well, then what do we do? What's the cybersecurity thing around that? Even the fact that they say, "Oh, we're just going to put software on a PC. Oh, we put a board in there and everything else like that," you end up with technical complexity. The thing is that what Collector does, though, it doesn't have audio inputs to it. Remember, we've got to bring in all of these radio stations. And then you hear people that say, "Oh, I'll just use an SDR." Well, an SDR still has to have an antenna hooked up to it, and then do what with it? As I've said before, you can't virtualize a microphone and you can't virtualize a speaker. We've got to figure out the things around it. So there's these things, again, we're bringing up the operational burdens, the cost. Is there an initial cost? What about continuing? And there's even IP related matters. There are patents around some of the elements around this thing that we need to bring forward and talk about that and sort these things out. It's really kind of the thing that there's an unequal amount of benefits depending on the participants. I mean, cable doesn't need certain things. Radio doesn't need certain things. I mean, we've got elements where we generate MPEG dash, and guys in radio say, "Oh, we don't need that." Yeah, but the cable guys do. So there's unequal benefits for different participants, and we need to sort that out. All we're saying is, what's the rush? There is no reason to race this through the FCC. Now, one would say, "Oh, well, wait a minute, Brand S is no longer building hardware." They've already come out and said the fact that in filings that, by the way, we will be able to support the hardware for several years. We've got plenty of inventory. So it's not really the key thing around it. And there is an example. There's a previous example. In 2008, we're going to go way back. In 2008 is when the FCC first said that when Oasis came out with the CAP standard, and the FCC said, "We're going to start looking at this and putting it into EAS devices." In 2008, a group of nine companies got together to form what was called the EAS CAP Industry Group. And that really represented guys like, Daryl Parker from TFT and MTS, and all these companies were involved in eSig. And eSig was really instrumental in coming together as a group of individuals that said, "Oh, look, if we're going to adopt this, let's put together a set of details about how we're going to process these things in a common form And that was all done and packaged as the ESIG, the guide that ESIG came out with a couple years later said, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to act as a group. This is how we're going to act on these things as a group. And then when that was complete, they took it and guess what the FCC did? They said, oh, this is great because you guys have done the footwork. We know what it is. They rubber stamped it into the rules. You don't send this stuff to regulators to sort out the technical details. You want to sort those things out before you go to the regulators, because that's one of the critical things around it. Really, the idea, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this right now, is really a false sense of why. And that's the thing that hasn't really been pulled out. I really would love to do this. I would love to make some major changes to Part 11 and everything else like that. But I think it's really one of those things that I don't just go racing in there and say, here's what and how we could do it. So part of the stuff around it is really recognize we don't oppose this. We just say, look, let's go down through that. And I think, Larry, you had a very good comment recently in Radio World. You said the exact same thing, didn't you? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, that's right, Bill. My main concern was I'm like you. I'm all for improvement. There's always room for improvement. And my basic comment was that we really need to take a look at this thing in research and development and testing to make sure that we don't diminish the importance and how EAS is designed to operate.
And that's a real good thing too, is figuring out some of the things about where we could run it and what types of things are there. The idea that this is a software situation that just runs in any old PC is again one of those things that you've got trust issues that you have to figure out. Do I trust it? I mean, even in the context of working in a virtual environment, I got a hypervisor. I mean, you got to trust the elements that you have. What about it in my sandbox? What happens if somebody else, can they write in on my memory? I mean, there's a lot of things around this that really have to be sorted, and you just can't run in there and say, oh, we're just going to do this and that's it. It really is a critical thing to try to figure this stuff out. So that was kind of me on my soapbox. I appreciate, thank you for the opportunity, Barry, to talk about that. But I'm just saying, we're gun-ho on trying to improve. We've actually looked at a whole bunch of things to improve it. I would love to do, as I said, some other things. I'll be straight up. I mean, we've tried to do something to change the protocol to add an element in there. In fact, I'm gonna race back to one of the slides here. This event code stuff right in here, the originator, location, and event duration, it's a big thing right here. EAS uses a 365, oops, sorry, because I clicked, a 365-day calendar. There's no year. The protocol doesn't have a year, which is why you can take an EAS event off of the internet and play it, and your device will do it because there's no year. The protocol didn't have a year in it. It just figured, okay, we'll roll over. We've looked at and actually presented some opportunities, maybe outside of the window. Remember, we recognized there's some things to put some additional data. There's actually an area inside here before you start the alert message audio where we can put a little burp, another extra burp to put the year in. That would be helpful. It won't impact SAMI receivers or anything else like that, but devices that have that knowledge would say, oh, wait a minute, I know the year. There could be other things like digital signature elements about this, so that over the course of the audio, we can put some things like, is this from a trusted source? Do we know that this was the originator that did it? Because it's not just saying, oh, it came from WXYZ. I can fake that any day of the week. But if I have a digital signature element around it and I know I'm only accepting those things, we should be doing this. It's not about software. It's about looking at this thing in an overarching way that we can present to the regulators about ways to improve it. So anyway.
Zero trust radio, my friend. Welcome to the future.
You got it. Exactly right.
We have a comment from Eugene, Oregon. It's K-O-R-E. K-O-R-E-L. I don't have a name here. Maybe he'll unmute. But he says, I'm in a situation where I just acquired a new station that does not have an EAS box. Wow. I need to get one and you can't find the hardware anywhere. I'm sharing a box with another station in the market. However, that situation is shaky at best. What can I do? We have both you, Bill, and Mary is here, and she's got a solution.
I'll
Unless
let
she,
Mary answer that. I mean, obviously you can. I'll take it easy. You can contact me, but that's one way right there. But Mary, go ahead.
Well, you can contact me and I can get you some pricing.
That's right. We can solve that problem very easily.
Mary is at Mary at 7bd.com. 7BD, Broadcast Depot, and she will take care of you.
Yep. So, any other questions? Again, I appreciate the opportunity. I hope that the initial part talking about what's possible and the fact that you can do this because we can leverage the stuff, we can do more with it, the way that we can do it. And again, I appreciate the opportunity, Barry, to kind of stand up on the soapbox and offer some things about that. And Larry, to your point too, I want to thank you for recognizing. And there's some other people that have come out there. The sad thing is that a lot of the people didn't necessarily file the FCC comments, but it's not one of these things that there's an overarching thing like, oh yeah, we have to go this direction no matter what. We agree. We definitely want to do things to improve it, but let's do it in the right way. Let's take the steps through it, think through the details before we just jump into this thing and create what essentially would be chaos.
We have another question here in the chat. Is anything being done to improve the performance of TTS, text to speech, right? When it gets used, the local counties tend not to include audio files in their alerts via CAP. It's pretty hard to understand. And of course, the text isn't written for TTS. I'm sure the National Weather Service uses a robot voice, but it sounds great. Other than mispronouncing some names, they have it worked out. Well, at least in the second or third generation. Perfect, was it Perfect Peter was first or
Perfect Paul? Yeah, Perfect Paul.
He wasn't so perfect.
Yeah.
It's getting better.
One of the things obviously there's a couple of different scenarios. We experimented with a company to try to do some cloud-based TTS elements for stations, and that was one particular thing. I mean, and of course it's always one of the things that concerns us on a bad day. And when I say on that bad day, when you really need this stuff to work, you want to make sure that it works to the absolute best of its abilities. And just speaking about the DASDEC, you can add, in the same vein as I talked about the other languages for German, Italian, those would have a TTS module and what we call a premium text-to-speech module that that allows you to be much, much, much more selective on things like speed, pronunciation. You use phonemes to actually say that you've got a colloquial name. I always use the reference because there's a county and a town in Utah that is spelled Tooele, so Tooele, and the colloquial pronunciation of that is Tooele. I do not know how you get Tooele out of a T. It looks like Thule, and that's what people would normally say. Or if it was pronounced in a text to speech engine, it would probably do Thule. But you can go in and look for very specific elements. One is an example, the Weather Service will use T-storm. Instead of thunderstorm, the text string will say T-storm. And when it's
saying that he's waiting for the builder to get back.
Oh, that's Mary. Oh, yeah, Mary's mic. Yeah. The T-storm would be pronounced by a regular text-to-speech engine as T-storm, and rather than saying thunderstorm and spelling it out. So if you have a premium text-to-speech voice, either on the DASDEC or another way, you can select those different types of things to be able to say, if you see this text string, here's how I want you to pronounce it. So there are ways of improving it. It's a cost thing. The free ones that come with a basic DASDEC, I always say is my Swedish chef. So it's the Muffet Swedish chef, and that's what you get because it's free. But you can definitely improve it by going into a premium voice we have female, we have male, we have a bunch of different ones, and we have, by the way, an Italian female, an Italian male. So depending on what people want to do, they can do those kinds of things. So there are ways to improve it. And it just depends on, quite frankly, it comes down to how much do you want to pay to do it.
Would you have him, would you do a demo for him, or would you
Sure.
Mary to do it? How would you have him decide what to do?
Actually, if you contact me, I could show you different things. Even what's important is send me a text string with some weird things, and I'll show you what the difference between the free and the premium is.
Okay, throw your contact back up.
Yep.
Any other questions that we have? It's just past 1 o'clock in the Central Time Zone. No, I don't know. It's Mountain Time. Yeah, we don't go on daylight saving time, so folks. But Bill's been talking for about an hour, and we appreciate that. Any questions before we let him go?
Hey, I saw that I don't know if it's Roger or Robert Miller said that they've got the DASDAQ voices. One of the things, if you have questions about that, let me show you some of the things you can do to tweak those. It's not, it's not straightforward, but I definitely help you do that.
John mentions here that
Yeah, he's got the same thing, FT for Fort and everything, and how it, and that's one of the things too, is as you point out, those the way that the National Weather Service, frankly, if you really look at that, they have not changed their format in years. It's old teletype style, and that's it. And the context of what they've done is fitting of teletext. It doesn't have, it's typically all capitalized. It's done in such a way that someone would rip and read it, and that's the difference versus having an automated device trying to sort some of that stuff out.
and for those of you that don't know, the person who wrote all the software for the National Weather Service died, and nobody knows how to replace it. That's one of the reasons why the Weather Service does not connect with the CAP at the FEMA, because they don't know how to do it.
Yep.
Any questions? We're run down here at the edge. I certainly want to thank you, Bill, for taking the time to share these things with us and let us see where things are at right now. And I think answering the questions of what it is here with the EAS software to give us things to think about and to discuss.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to get a chance to chat with the group here.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.